They mocked my life choices over dinner. Then the waiter turned, smiled at me and said, "Your table is ready, Chef Reyes." Their jaws dropped. Hey there. Welcome to today's story. Wherever you are, walking, working, maybe just needing a moment to breathe, I invite you to slow down for a few minutes and really listen. Because today's story is about a woman who walked into a family dinner at a restaurant her family didn't know she owned. It's about judgment, resilience, and what happens when success finally speaks louder than doubt. Have you ever been underestimated by the people who should have believed in you the most? If so, you might find yourself in her shoes. Stick around to see how she took her power back. Not with revenge, but with grace, fire, and a table she built herself. And hey, if you enjoy these stories, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. That little click helps me keep bringing you more moments like this. Thanks for being here. Let's get into it.
I was plating roasted fennel when the envelope arrived. It was thick, cream-colored, and embossed with golden foil, exactly the kind my mother used for social functions that required an audience. At first, I thought it had been delivered to the wrong Camille. The hostess dropped it off between prep and service, right on the stainless steel counter of my kitchen, where ambition boiled harder than any stock. I didn't open it right away. Something about the weight of it made my hands hesitate. It felt heavy with assumptions. Later, after closing, I sat alone in my office with the letter in front of me. No name on the envelope, just Reyes Residence. Which was ironic, considering I hadn't lived in that house for nearly 6 years. Inside was an invitation. Formal, engraved. A dinner party to celebrate my younger sister Bianca's engagement. At Maison Ray. My restaurant. They didn't know that, of course. According to the RSVP, the venue had been chosen for its exceptional exclusivity and discreet sophistication. The irony nearly made me laugh out loud. I could picture my mother, Victoria Reyes, queen of appearances, bragging to her guests about securing a table at one of the most impossible restaurants to book in New York. She'd have no clue she was sipping wine under lighting I personally designed, eating off plates I custom chose from a little ceramic studio in Brooklyn. I read the invitation again. I wasn't sure what shocked me more, that they had invited me at all, or that they didn't recognize Maison Ray as mine. The last conversation I had with my family ended with my father, Nathaniel, saying, "If you want to throw away your education on kitchen work, don't expect a cent from us." I left with a duffel bag and the kind of silence that stretches for years. So why now? Why invite the daughter they disowned to a table they assumed she couldn't afford to sit at? I wasn't angry. I wasn't flattered. I was curious. What would happen if I sat at that table again, not as the struggling, disobedient daughter, but as the woman who built it? Not everyone deserves a second chance. But sometimes you show up not to get one. You show up to take your seat back. The first thing I noticed wasn't my family. It was the wine. The unmistakable scent of a 2013 Margaux, oak forward, a little arrogant. My father must have chosen it. He always ordered like he was negotiating a merger, not a meal. Omar led me through the dining room with practiced calm, but I could feel the subtle shifts. Staff who knew me only as chef darted glances, confused. I gave them a tiny nod. Play along. Tonight, I was no one special. Not yet. There they were, center of the restaurant, like royalty claiming a throne. My mother, Victoria Reyes, perched in her chair as though gravity didn't apply to her. She wore a cream-wrapped dress and diamond studs subtle enough to look effortless, but strategic enough to whisper, "Old money." Her smile at seeing me was smooth, rehearsed, and precisely 2 seconds late. "Camille," she cooed, rising to offer an air kiss. Her perfume wrapped around me, jasmine and judgment. "We were beginning to think you wouldn't come." "I'm exactly on time," I replied, checking the sleek watch she didn't recognize as a vintage Rolex I bought at auction last year. My father, Nathaniel, stood with a stiff hug that smelled like aftershave and boardroom authority. "You look healthy," he said, which in Rhea speak meant I'd gained weight. Bianca stayed seated. "Come," she said, with a glossy smile and zero warmth. Her engagement ring caught the light with the kind of flash you'd time for Instagram. "This is Cole," she gestured lazily to the man beside her. "My fiancé." Cole stood and extended his hand like I was a recruiter, not family. Cole Harrington, investment group partner, Princeton undergrad. Of course. We shook hands. His grip was firm, dominance disguised as etiquette. I returned it just as firmly. Let him think what he wanted. Julian, my older brother, offered a small smile from across the table. It was tired, like a man half invested in peacekeeping, half resigned to the circus. Leah, his wife, nodded politely, avoiding direct eye contact. She'd always been the quiet one, observant, careful. There was only one open seat, between Victoria and Bianca. Naturally. "I'll sit here," I said, sliding in as the server appeared with the amuse-bouche. It was perfect. Delicate beet gelée on a crisp fennel wafer with smoked ricotta. My own creation, months in development. "This is cute," Bianca said, poking it with her fork. "Is it supposed to be food?" "It's meant to cleanse the palate," I replied evenly. Cole popped his in whole. "Not bad. I've had something similar at 11 Madison." "You didn't," I thought. "I trained the sous chef who made it." "So," Victoria said, swirling her wine, "tell us what you've been up to. You've been so off the radar." "I've been working," I said. "In food?" she clarified, like the word itself had dirt on it. "Yes, as a chef." Bianca chuckled. "So you're still chasing that whole kitchen fantasy, huh?" "Still?" I repeated. "I'd say I've grown into it." Nathaniel cleared his throat. "Well, everyone needs purpose, as long as you're supporting yourself. We've always said," my mother added, "our door is open if it ever becomes too difficult." My teeth clenched. I kept my face neutral. They didn't know. They didn't know they were sitting in my restaurant, eating food I created, sipping wine I selected, surrounded by staff I hired, complaining inside a world I built from scratch. But that was fine. Let them talk, because when the check came, so would the truth. By the second course, I'd mastered the art of swallowing insults with wine. The heirloom tomato tartlets were served. Paper-thin crusts, house-whipped basil ricotta, drizzled with elderflower vinaigrette. A dish that once made a food critic write, "Poetry disguised as pastry." Bianca barely touched hers. "Too acidic," she muttered, pushing it aside like a child refusing spinach. "And tomatoes for an engagement dinner?" I didn't answer. Across the table, Julian gave me a tight-lipped smile. He knew better. Leah just looked tense, like she was preparing for turbulence. "So, Camille," Cole leaned in, knife idle. "Bianca mentioned you were in food. What exactly do you do?" Before I could respond, Victoria chimed in. "She's being humble. Camille has always been hands-on, passionate, artistic, even if that hasn't always translated into financial stability." Ah, there it was. The elegant dig. "I'm doing fine," I replied, careful with tone, careful with everything. "You're not still living in Queens, are you?" Bianca asked, tilting her head. "The trains are so loud." I moved. "Brooklyn," she snorted. "That's butter, I guess. Artsy poor instead of just poor." I laughed softly. "Closer than you think." The third course came. Seared scallops in a smoked corn puree with charred spring onions, a dish I'd spent weeks perfecting. The kitchen executed it flawlessly. Nathaniel sliced into one with his fork, inspecting like he was reviewing a stock report. Not bad, but the portion is small, Bianca finished. Do restaurants not feed people anymore? It's a tasting menu, I reminded them. It's not supposed to be a buffet. Cole swirled his wine. Decent pairing. Not amazing, but decent. He had no idea that Jose, our sommelier, curated the entire wine list with me over a 6-month tasting process. But sure, decent. The conversation turned to wedding planning as expected. Bianca gushed about florals, venues, seating politics like it was statecraft. We've booked St. Paul's Cathedral, she announced proudly, and the reception's at the Langston estate. 800 guests. 800? I blinked. My network is expansive, Cole said, as if that were justification. Networking is essential, Victoria added, nodding like a PR executive. What about you, Camille? Bianca said sweetly. Any prospects, or are you still married to the kitchen? She's always been too focused to date, Victoria offered as if explaining away a defect. Or too picky, Nathaniel chuckled. There's that cardiologist I mentioned. Lovely man. Thanks, but I'm not looking to be fixed up. Oh, honey, Bianca leaned in, at your age, you should really start locking something down. I could feel the tension in my jaw. I took a sip of wine instead of answering. The duck was next, medium rare, cherry gastrique, farro with roasted shallots, one of my signature dishes. Cole took a single bite, then frowned. Is this undercooked? No, I said calmly. It's medium rare. That's how duck should be served. I like my meat well done. I didn't flinch. Then you're overcooking it. He raised a hand for the server, Sienna, one of my best. He didn't even look at her. Take it back. Cook it properly. Sienna glanced at me. I gave her a nod. She knew what to do. Start fresh. Don't ruin the duck just to please an insecure ego. When she left, Victoria sighed. You still haven't told us how you're affording all this, Camille. Affording what? Your outfit? This restaurant? She gestured vaguely. Your lifestyle? Surely food service doesn't pay that well. Maybe she's dating someone with money, Bianca offered with a grin. Julian gave her a sharp look. Bianca! What? She shrugged. I'm just saying, we all rearranged our schedules for the Skinner. I assume Camille picked the place. It's aspirational. I'm not dating anyone, I said evenly. Then how do you afford this? Cole asked, folding his napkin like a closing statement. Let's be honest, a dinner here probably costs more than your week's paycheck. The air went still. Leah shifted uncomfortably. Julian rubbed the bridge of his nose. Even Victoria blinked as if her daughter-in-law had stepped a little too far into the fire. I manage my finances just fine, I replied, voice like ice. Before Bianca could strike again, the bill arrived. A black leather folder, discreetly placed in the center of the table by Omar. My father reached for it. Cole intercepted. Please, Nathaniel, he said with a smile. Allow me. This dinner's on me. He opened the folder and froze. His expression dropped half a shade, then another. He tried to mask it with a polite smile, but I had already seen it, the tightening jaw, the quiet panic. There seems to be a mistake, he said slowly. They've only charged us for the wine. Victoria furrowed her brow. Excuse me? Cole said, I'll flag someone. Omar returned instantly, as if summoned by magic, or something closer. Is there a problem, sir? he asked, polite as always. Yes, the bill is incorrect. The food isn't listed. Omar glanced at me. I met his gaze. It was time. I gave him the smallest nod. It's no mistake, he said, turning back to Cole. The dinner portion has been taken care of. By whom? Nathaniel asked. Omar smiled. By the owner. 6 faces turned to me, confused, blinking, waiting for the punchline. I leaned back in my chair, let the moment breathe, then smiled. Welcome to Maison Ray, I said. My restaurant. For a moment, no one said a word. My family, the people who had spent most of dinner dissecting my choices, my appearance, my value, sat frozen like a still life. Faces half-lit in candlelight, mouths slightly parted, brows knit in disbelief. It was the kind of silence I'd waited years to earn, not out of spite, but as proof that I had built something undeniable. You own this place? Victoria was the first to speak. Her voice was thin, like paper unraveling. I do, I said, calm, measured, my pulse loud but my tone even. I'm the executive chef and sole proprietor of Maison Ray. Nathaniel blinked once, slowly, as if the words needed a second pass through his brain. Since when? Since 2 years ago, though I've been building it longer than that. The name didn't tip you off? I thought it was a coincidence, Julian said softly, almost apologetically. But I didn't think. No one ever does. Cole looked down at the bill again, like the paper might rearrange itself into something that made more sense. So all of this was what, a test? It was dinner. You picked the place. I accepted the invitation. Bianca scoffed. You let us sit here and make fools of ourselves. You made your own choices. I simply didn't correct them. That's cruel. No, I said sharply, finally meeting her eyes. What's cruel is being told you're throwing your life away because you chose a path that didn't fit the family playbook. What's cruel is being cut off at 23 with nothing but student loans and a secondhand knife set. What's cruel is building something from scratch and knowing the people who claim to love you most would only respect it if it succeeded. The words landed hard. Bianca's jaw tightened. Victoria's eyes dropped to her folded napkin. Even Nathaniel leaned back, his usual composure cracking. Julian broke the tension. You should have told us, Camille. I looked at him. Would you have listened? His mouth opened, then closed. Exactly. Chef Elodie appeared then, professional in her crisp whites, her black hair tied in a clean knot, a clipboard in one hand. She gave me a soft nod. Camille, the Matsuda tasting has arrived. They're ready when you are. Also, the Times confirmed the second interview slot. Thanks, Elle. I'll be right there. Victoria stared after her, bewildered. The Times? Food and Culture Sunday spread. They're featuring Maison as a case study in female-led culinary entrepreneurship. And the investors? Nathaniel asked, his voice low. Upstairs in the lounge. We're discussing a second location, possibly LA. Bianca pushed back her chair hard. So what, you just parade us in here to humiliate us before your team and go back to your business empire? I invited no one, I said coolly. This was your event, remember? I didn't know. No, you didn't, but now you do. Why didn't you tell us any of this before? Victoria asked, softer this time. If we'd known, you'd have done what? Bragged about me to your friends at the club? Praised me at galas you once told me I didn't belong at? I shook my head. I didn't need you to validate what I was building. I needed to know I could stand without you. But we're your family, Nathaniel said, the words oddly brittle. You were. But family doesn't withhold love when you take a different route. Family doesn't laugh when you struggle and act surprised when you succeed. Leah finally spoke up. I had no idea, Camille. I'm sorry. I picked this restaurant because one of Ethan's colleagues raved about it. I didn't know it was yours. You're the only one I'm not disappointed in tonight, I said gently. You just wanted good food. You got it. That drew a reluctant laugh from Julian, the first sound resembling a warmth all evening. Victoria reached for her wine glass with trembling fingers. So, the menu, the design, all of this? Every choice, down to the way the forks are aligned. Cole spoke up again, his voice oddly diplomatic. Maison is impressive, seriously, and your positioning, brand, market niche, press, it's sharp. Have you considered expansion funding? I've got connections with a hospitality investment group in Chicago. I raised my hand to stop him. Don't pivot this into business, Cole. You insulted my staff, my food, and my profession. You don't get a seat at this table now just because the balance sheet looks promising. Bianca glared. So this is who you are now, cold, ruthless. No, I said, rising from my chair. This is who I've always been. You just never cared to see it. There was a long pause before Victoria stood up more slowly, her voice uncertain. Maybe we could talk more later? Perhaps Sunday brunch? I met her eyes. For the first time in a long while, they weren't smug or judging. They were searching, nervous. I'll think about it. I turned to leave, and Julian stood too. Camille, he said quietly, I know I didn't stand up for you before. I should have. What you've built here, it's remarkable. Thanks, Jules, I said, almost softly. That means something. Truly. Sienna appeared near the bar with a clipboard. I glanced toward her, then back at my family, my past life assembled like a collage of old expectations and outdated opinions. I have a tasting upstairs. You're welcome to stay and finish dessert. On the house. I paused. But from here on out, I run the narrative. And with that, I walked away. The next morning, my phone buzzed at 9:14 a.m. Julian. Still up for brunch? Mom's insisting. She said she'll behave. I stared at the message for a long beat, then laughed. An actual laugh. A week ago, the idea of brunch with my family would have made my stomach tighten. But now, after last night, I didn't feel small anymore. I felt unbothered. 1 hour, I picked the place. I chose Elma's, a hole-in-the-wall spot in the East Village that didn't care who your father knew or where your sister got engaged. No white tablecloths, no wine list, no pretension. Just coffee served strong in chipped mugs, and eggs poached so perfectly it made Michelin plating look like a costume. When I arrived, Victoria was already seated, her coat draped neatly over the back of a mismatched chair. Her eyes scanned the room as if calculating how many hand sanitizers this place was lacking. Charming, she said, without a trace of charm. Julian gave me a civil smirk as he stirred his coffee. Leah sat beside him, already halfway through her avocado toast. I told her not to wear heels. She didn't listen. I never do, Victoria muttered. I slid into the seat across from her, ordering nothing yet, just watching, observing. So, she began, placing a cloth napkin in her lap like she was on autopilot. About last night. No need to replay it. We all remember what was said, some more clearly than others. Julian coughed into his cup. Leah looked like she wanted to disappear into her plate. Victoria clasped her hands. I made your point, powerfully, and I'll admit, I deserved it. Thank you, I said, surprised she even offered that much. But, she continued, I'd like to think we're not past repair. I tilted my head. Why now? Because I saw something last night I hadn't seen before. You. Not the child who fought with me over culinary school, not the girl I dismissed as being lost, but a woman who built something extraordinary. You saw it because I made it undeniable, but you never tried to see it before. That's the difference. She didn't argue. I suppose I wanted to believe that if you followed our path, you'd be safe, successful. We never accounted for the fact that our path was never yours. That's the first honest thing you've said to me in 10 years, I said softly. The waitress came by, took our orders, and left. Victoria stared at the chipped table edge. I could tell it was driving her mad. I do want a relationship, she said, lowering her voice. But I understand it has to look different now. It does, I replied. It's not about holiday cards and press releases. It's about showing up when there's nothing in it for you. I can do that. I'll believe it when I see it. Victoria nodded, not offended, maybe even relieved. She was used to negotiating contracts. This felt like one. Julian leaned in. So if you ever do expand to LA, I want in equity, investment, branding, whatever you need. You want to go into business with me? I raised a brow. You want to support me, he said, in a way that matters. Leah reached over, placed a hand on his. That small gesture made me feel something unfamiliar. Hope. Our food arrived, unpretentious and steaming. Victoria picked at her omelet like she was deciphering an alien life form. This is actually delicious, she finally admitted. I smiled. You just said that out loud. Are you okay? She gave me a look. Let's not get carried away. We ate in relative peace. No lectures, no probing questions about dating or weight or career plans. Just food, just conversation. I found myself telling them about the mentorship program I'd launched, Saturday mornings at Maison, training young chefs from underserved backgrounds, about Zoe, my star apprentice, who reminded me of myself at 22, but with better knife skills and a sharper spine. Julian listened like it mattered. Leah asked questions like she cared. And Victoria? She didn't interrupt once. We finished with burnt caramel lattes and a shared slice of almond cake. When the check came, Julian grabbed it fast. No, I said, tossing my card down. This one's mine. Camille, he began. Let me. Victoria looked at me as the waitress took the card away. It's strange. What is? This feeling, she said, letting you take care of something. I held her gaze. It's not strange. It's new. She nodded. When we stepped outside, the sky had turned gray with the threat of rain. I pulled my coat tighter. Thank you, Victoria said, voice small. For brunch? For not slamming the door. I didn't say you're welcome. I didn't need to. Some things didn't need a bow. As we parted ways, Julian gave me a side hug. Leah squeezed my shoulder. Victoria hesitated, then kissed my cheek, hesitant but real. I watched them go, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I'd lost a family. I felt like I'd redefined one, not by blood, not by obligation, but by choice, on my terms. 2 weeks later, I sat alone at my usual table in Maison Ray after closing, a mug of black tea cupped in my hands and the scent of caramelized onions still lingering in the air. The lights were dimmed, the last dish dried, and the hum of the restaurant had faded to a comforting stillness. My staff had all gone home. Chef Elodie had left a sticky note on my door. The new spring tart is magic. Zoe nailed it. Also, go home before sunrise for once. I smiled, pocketing the note. The kitchen was in good hands tonight. It felt good to trust someone else with the stove. I hadn't always been that way. But somewhere between burnout and growth, I'd learned that control and leadership weren't the same thing. I opened my laptop. The draft of my cookbook's introduction sat untouched for weeks. I'd stared at that blinking cursor more times than I cared to count. How do you put your entire identity on paper and still leave space for someone else to understand it? I started typing. Food was never just food for me. It was defiance. It was art. It was proof that what I felt, what I created, mattered. I've burned more roux than I've sent perfect plates, and I've failed more times than I can count. But I never stopped feeding people, because that was how I learned to feed myself. I paused, reread the words, and let them sit. There was a text from Bianca I hadn't answered. Need florist help. Wedding brain melting. Can I bribe you with espresso to talk centerpiece strategy? Old Bianca would have never asked. She would have demanded. This was different. It wasn't a full repair, but it was a crack in the armor. I texted her back. Tomorrow, you buy. No peonies. She replied with a string of laughing emojis and a sarcastic, "Oh, you're the worst. See what to?" That was our language. We'd always fought better than we hugged. But now, for the first time in our lives, it didn't feel like a contest. A week ago, Julian brought his kids to the restaurant after hours. I walked them through the kitchen, let them toss pasta dough, and showed them the difference between truffle oil and actual truffles. His daughter asked if I was famous, and when I told her no, she nodded solemnly and said, "You should be." That moment meant more than any magazine spread ever could. Victoria had called twice this week, once to ask about how to pronounce sumac, and once just to say she liked the chef profile written about me in the Times. Her voice was still a little clipped, like she didn't quite know how to be casual, but she was trying. Trying was new for her, I noticed. Even Nathaniel, who hadn't reached out directly, had sent me a package. Inside was my old chef's knife, handle worn, blade dulled, engraved with my initials. I hadn't seen it since the day I moved out. Taped to it was a note in his neat mechanical handwriting. "Every empire starts with the right tool. Figured you'd want this back." I ran my fingers along the hilt for a long time before putting it on my office shelf. I didn't need it anymore, but I wanted it nearby. Not as a reminder of where I started, but as proof of what I reclaimed. And yet, as all these fractured connections started to slowly thread themselves back together again, I realized something that surprised me. I no longer needed their approval. Not because it didn't matter, but because it no longer defined me. I had made it without their help, without their praise. I'd built Maison Ray from nothing. I created space for young chefs like Zoe. I wrote my story with burn marks on my hands and calluses that didn't soften with time. Now I was writing the next chapter on my own. I looked around the restaurant. The chairs were stacked, the linen was pressed, the kitchen was quiet. And for once, so was my mind. I closed the laptop, grabbed my coat, and turned off the lights. As I walked through the empty dining room, my dining room, I didn't feel like I was leaving something behind. I felt like I was walking toward something new. Because healing doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it arrives as silence, as the click of a door you've chosen to reopen, just slightly. And sometimes the most powerful seat at the table is the one you built yourself.
And now I'd love to hear from you. What did this story stir in you? Did it remind you of a moment when you stood your ground? Or walked away stronger than you arrived? Leave a comment below. Your thoughts matter here more than you know. If this story spoke to you, hit that like button and subscribe for more true stories about finding your voice, building your worth, and rewriting the roles others try to cast you in. Thanks for staying with me till the very end. Until next time, stay brave, stay grounded, and never forget, your story belongs to you.